At the end of the 19th century, three countries were competing for the same thing. Not land, not gold, people.
The United States, Argentina, and Brazil were all reaching for the same European families, and one of them decided to advertise.
Things you've never seen now revealed.
This is how the world moves?
At the end of the 19th century, three countries were competing for the same resource. Not coal, not land, not gold, people. The United States, Argentina, and Brazil all needed workers, all at once, and all of them were reaching toward the same exhausted villages of Southern Europe, the same families, sitting at the same kitchen tables, trying to decide what to do with their children's lives. You already know how one of those stories ends. Ellis Island, New York, the photographs everybody has seen. But millions of those families didn't sail north. They sailed south. And they went because one of those three countries did something the others didn't. It advertised.
Between 1860 and 1920, roughly 7 million Italians left Italy. 7 million. An entire nation walking out of the door. Unification had dismantled the economy of whole regions. There was no work, no land, and in many places, genuinely not enough food. And when a family is in that position, the decision is not really about ambition. It's about survival. So the question wasn't whether to leave. The question was where to go. And that question was being answered, in part, by pieces of paper.
Because in 1871, the Brazilian Empire began financing the passage of Europeans to São Paulo, and crucially this time, without requiring them to pay it back. Then in the late 1880s, an organization was created specifically to promote emigration to Brazil. It printed leaflets in Portuguese, Italian, and German, and distributed them across Europe. And look at what those leaflets actually did. They promoted Brazil by comparing it favorably to the other countries receiving immigrants at that moment, meaning the United States and Argentina. This was a nation advertising itself, competing for customers, and it worked with frightening efficiency. Immigration into São Paulo rose from 6,500 people in 1885 to 91,826 in 1888, a 14-fold increase in 3 years.
And there was a reason Brazil needed those people so urgently. In 1888, Brazil abolished slavery, the last country in the Americas to do so. The coffee plantations, which were the engine of the entire national economy, suddenly faced a labor crisis. So the state paid for European families to cross the ocean and take up that work. Between 1887 and 1930, 3.8 million foreigners entered Brazil. 35% Italian, 29% Portuguese, almost 15% Spanish. These are not abstractions. These are grandparents and great-grandparents of people alive today.
But hold on to one thing before we board the ship with them. Because the promise printed on that leaflet and the reality waiting on the other side were two very different things. So different that, a few years later, the country sending these people away would take a drastic step to try to stop it. We'll get there. First, the crossing.
And the crossing is where this stops being statistics and becomes people. Let me take you on one specific voyage, because this one is unusually well documented. The 28th of April, 1908, the port of Kobe in Japan. A ship called the Kasato Maru raises anchor carrying 781 Japanese passengers from 165 families. Destination: Santos, Brazil. The route runs through Singapore, around Africa via Cape Town, and then across the Atlantic. 52 days at sea. And it was nothing like a voyage you would picture. The passengers were housed beside the ship's enormous coal store, down in the hold. With that many people packed together, the air barely circulated. The first illnesses appeared quickly, people catching colds easily from the cold and from spending hours in wet clothing. Food was poor. 3 meals a day of rice, soup, dried fish, and preserves.
And there is one line in the records of that voyage that says more than any description could. It notes that across those 52 days aboard the Kasato Maru, there were no deaths and historians record this as unusual for such a long stay aboard a ship in the early 20th century. Sit with that sentence for a moment. Surviving was the exception. On a crossing like this, the expectation was that somebody would not arrive. And when that happened, the person who died in the middle of the ocean was buried at sea because there was no other possibility weeks away from any coast. That is how a great many people said goodbye to a father, a mother, or a child in open water, with no headstone and no place to return to. And knowing that risk, they still boarded.
And then something happened that nobody had planned. When the Casato Maru finally docked in Santos on the 18th of June, 1908, Brazil was in the middle of its traditional June festivals. The sky was full of fireworks. And the story goes that those Japanese immigrants arriving after 52 days in the hold of a ship looked up at that sky and believed the fireworks were a welcome for them. I find that the most beautiful and the saddest image in this entire story. Because from there, they were sent to the immigrants' hostel in São Paulo, and within days, they were already on the coffee farms of the interior, beginning to pay through labor for what the leaflet had described as free.
Which brings us to the thing I asked you to hold on to. Because the reality was not the leaflet. Immigrants arrived with signed contracts specifying where they would go and under what conditions they would work. And the conditions on the coffee plantations of São Paulo were harsh enough that, in 1902, something happened that almost nobody knows about. Italy itself banned subsidized emigration to Brazil. The country exporting its own people pulled the brake, officially, because of the poor conditions its emigrants were being subjected to in the state of São Paulo. It wasn't Brazil closing the door. It was Italy pulling its own children back. And that decision, combined with a crisis in the coffee market, explains much of the drop in Italian immigration from 1904 onward.
And yet, look at what those people built anyway. Those 3.8 million arrivals made the country that exists today. The food carries their surnames. An Italian journalist wrote in 1922 that his countrymen had managed to impose their own cuisine on the tastes of this nation. Entire neighborhoods in southern Brazil still carry the accent of the people who arrived. Brazilian agriculture was transformed by techniques Japanese immigrants brought with them. None of that was written on the leaflet, neither the hardship nor the achievement. These people boarded on a badly explained promise, crossed weeks of darkness in a ship's hold, and built something far larger than anything they had been offered.
And that is why this channel exists. Because we tend to assume that staying still is the normal condition of human life, and that moving is the exception. Look closely at history, and it's the reverse. Human beings have been moving the entire time. They crossed forests chasing fur, they crossed deserts chasing water, and they crossed entire oceans chasing a line printed on a piece of paper that said there was work on the other side. Every one of those crossings redrew the map of the world. So the next time you look at your own surname, remember that it isn't only a name, it's the trace of a journey somebody made so that you could be exactly where you are. That's why we look at how the world moves in detail.
Now tell me in the comments, where did your family come from? What's the surname? And what part of the world did it leave? Write it below. I read them all. And this is my favorite part of running this channel. If this story moved you, leave a like, subscribe, and send it to someone in your family who will recognize it. And don't miss the next video, where we go further back still, to when the ocean was a road for nobody, and a handful of people decided to cross it anyway. See you there, here on How the World Moves.